Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our November edition of the Forest Restoration Talks, a monthly webinar series, which is jointly organized by the Superb Project and IUFRO's task force transforming forest landscapes for future climates and human well-being. Today, we have Silvio Schüler as a speaker. He will be introduced by Magda, the moderator, later. And he will talk about assisted translocation of tree populations in support of European forest carbon sink potential. But before we start with the content, I would like to guide you through the housekeeping rules again. This webinar is being recorded, as you know, and the recording will be available to watch on the EFI YouTube account and on the IUFRO website afterwards. If you have questions to the panelists, please put them in the dedicated Q&A box. And then after this presentation, we will promote participants to speakers so that you can ask the questions yourselves, which makes it a little more interactive and enables more participation instead of just kind of the moderator reading out the questions. And if you want to tweet about the webinar, please make sure to tag us, either IUFRO or Superb Project. And now I'd like to hand over to my colleague Magda, who is the coordinator of Superb, and she will moderate the webinar today together with Andreas Beute from IUFRO.
Thank you so much, Gesche. So, thank you for being here. Today we have a nice talk by Silvio Schüler. Silvio is head of Department of Forest Growth, Silviculture and Genetics at the Austrian Research Centre for Forests in Vienna. Silvio's research revolves around silviculture, forest growth, genetics, botany, and evolutionary biology. Silvio is a coordinator of SAS3, European project revolving around conservation and sustainable utilization of forest diversity and climate change. He will be presenting a lot of this today. But also, Silvio is a task leader in Superb Project. And in our project, he is leading the activity around creating a support of regeneration and planting activities. So everything about seed provenance recommendation, evaluation of diversity, plasticity, etc. We will have a lot of questions to ask you after this, Silvio. So without being longer, I will hand it to you. And you are ready to hear what you have to tell us about this.
Thank you. Thank you, Magda. Thank you, Gesche, for the invitation, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to show a little bit what we have done in the past and how we can contribute with this to the aims of the Superb project, but maybe also to other questions related to forest transformation, forest adaptation to climate change, and forest restoration. The work that I'm introducing today is a study that we started quite a long time ago with my long-term co-worker Debocioto Chakraborty. He's also with us today, as well as my co-worker Albert. He's also with us today on this meeting, so if there comes a lot of questions, they will probably help me to answer these questions. However, this research has been started in a past project. You already said that this was the SAS3 project. It was actually a cooperation in the Interreg Central Europe region between between 7 Central European countries. So what is the issue that we are mainly dealt with, and that is also the main issue that we are dealing now within the Superb project, is that we nowadays see in many countries in Europe that the climate crisis reached European forest. This is just a picture of some cleared forest in northern Austria. Earlier, this has been spruce stands. And they had to be cleared 3-4 years ago due to the bark beetle infestations. If you look now at the same spot, you will see much more open landscapes because there were so many of these secondary spruce forests that got infected with the bark beetles and had to be cleared. Nowadays they are already been restored, and there has been reforestation going on with other tree species, maybe other provenances. But many of you have probably seen similar problems within their region, and this issue did not only let's say was not only a problem of Norway spruce. Of course, the problems with Norway spruce are most visible in the broad public, but we have already seen diebacks in the Austrian pine, in Pinus nigra, already 10 years ago, where we have seen that within the most northern natural distribution area of Austrian pine, which is in the eastern alpine area, we have seen dieback of these species, a huge dieback of the species with huge problems for the local foresters, but also for nature conservation in these areas. We already in the past years have seen that in many regions we have problems with beech, and we have seen dieback of beech populations, and in some areas where very nice old growth stands got affected within the natural distribution area with the symptoms that are not so clear and probably are related to drought and the climatic problems we have seen. But besides also these direct climatic problems, we have also seen that within the past years that other problems, like for example the ash disease, which is a problem due to the globalization, has also damaged our European forests a lot and led to huge transformations on the forest sector. If we are discussing what might happen and how our forests in the future might look like, it is always good also to look a little bit more in the deeper past and maybe in the expected future. And I like always this diagram from Burke et al. PNAS 2018, which is also in the latest IPCC reports within. And what they show here is they go a little bit further in the past of the Earth's climate, up to 16 million years back, and they show how the global climate, how the global temperatures decreased within the last 60 million years around the globe. And then you see within the middle of the diagram, you see the ice ages within the last million years, with some several decreases of the temperature, and then a warm time and a cold time. And just on the very, let's say on the very right side, you see our recent climate with this thick yellow line here. This was a relatively stable climate within the last 8,000 to 10,000 years. And just for the last 200 years, we see that, this climate was stable, but now within the last 50 years, it increased. And the interesting thing is here that if you compare, if we look at the predictions of climate change, how climate might develop within the next 100 years, then we expect, according all, depending on what climate change scenario you are going through, we might see changes between 1.5 up to 7 degrees Celsius in the global increase in this temperature. And you then compare these potential future climate with the climate in the past, that then you see that let's say in the best case, if you're really able to reach the climate of the Paris Agreement, more or less, it would be this gray area on the right side of the diagram. Then we might reach a climate that was on Earth for the last time between 3 and 5 million years ago. So that means we are setting our ecosystems back and the climate of our ecosystems back for 3 to 5 million years. However, if we are not able to reach the agreements of the Paris Agreement, and we might see a stronger increase in global temperatures, then our Earth will see an increase in temperatures that has at the last time been on Earth between 20 to 40 million years ago. So that means there would be, whatever climate change go, we will set out the climate of the Earth back to a climate that we have not seen in the recent past, but just a long time ago. So what does this has to do with our forests, with our forest ecosystems, and with local adaptation? You might ask. There is one question that has always been discussed in paleobotany, and this was the question: how many tree species, how many tree genera were existing in the past on the different continents on the northern hemisphere? And if you are believing all these paleobotanical studies, then the fossil flora of Europe has been very rich in the long past. So around in the Pliocene until the beginning of the Pliocene, also European forests had a very rich fauna with up to 130 different fossil tree genera, which is similar as the number of tree genera that we see today in the north and the East Central Asia, and even more than we see in Eastern and North America or Western North America. However, due to these long-term climatic changes, so decline of the temperature over several million years, and then due to these ice ages that we have seen within the last million years, the number of tree species, especially in Europe, declined dramatically. Today, we have from these 130 tree genera that we had in the past, we only had 38 tree genera left. So 70% of the species or the tree genera got extinct on the European scale. And there have been many big ecological studies already in the 1970s, 1980s on this to identify what was the reason that why in Europe so many tree genera got extinct, and the causes for this drastic decline of tree diversity in pre-human times has been mainly related to a mismatch of the species niches and the changing environments, and due to a lags in adaptation and migration, which seem to have been larger in Europe than they have been in Asia and in North America. So this has been always confronted with why we have such a low tree species diversity. And we can even look whether the tree species that we see today, that means the tree species and also the tree communities that we see today on Europe, whether they already are in equilibrium with the climate. And there have been already 10 to 15 years ago, there have been a couple of studies dealing with this issue, and they found out that our European forest trees, they already fill their potential range incomplete. They found this study of some Danish research group. They found, for example, that from the 55 European forest trees that they studied, 36 of them covered less than 50% of their climatically suitable range. Most notable, for example, Abies alba, silver fir, which would have a much wider potential according to their climatic suitability, but reached only up to the European mountains here, mountain ranges. Or another example is Taxus baccata. In Fagus sylvata is not so much, but they found that only 8 tree species cover more than 80% of their suitable range, and they agree that conclude that there was a widespread is a widespread dispersal limitation on the still ongoing post-glacial migration. And why is this important for us? This is important for us because we can predict, and this has been shown in many studies, that our main tree species, or most European tree species, will undergo significant tree species distribution shifts. There are many studies have been published in the last 25 years around. This is just a study from a Polish co-worker, Marcin Diderski, who showed it very strongly, and he's just showing the examples from silver fir and Fagus sylvatica here, with the red areas showing those areas where the species might get extinct locally, and the blue areas showing those areas where the species might grow in the future, and the green areas those where they can grow, where it's growing today and might also grow in the future. Aside from that, there have also been studies who analyze the direction and of these tree distribution shifts. For example, here a study from Eric Thurm, and they also measured about which distances, what is the mean shift that these tree species need to undergo, and which parts of their, or how big are the distribution areas that might be gained or lost for the different tree species within the different climatic regions in the boreal or continental zone. So there are a lot of studies on that. And finally, there are also a couple of studies who already quantified a change in the tree functional diversity. Wilfried Thüler made a study already nearly 20 years ago, where they calculated the change in the Simpson diversity index for tree species between future and current climate. And they already analyzed how these tree species diversity might look if migration is limited or is unlimited. And you see in this figure that in significant parts of Europe, especially in Central, Eastern Europe, we see a strong decrease in the tree functional diversity without migration, if there is no migration taking place. However, if you assume that there would be an unlimited migration, these change in tree functional diversity would be much less than without any migration. So this leads us to this discussion and the suggestion that we might need for our forest ecosystems assisted migration or respectively assisted gene flow to support our forest ecosystems in climate change. For those who have not heard these topics, I just want to quickly mention to that was just to refer to this figure from Sally Atkins which was responsible for mainly developing this concept for forest trees. And here you see quickly the distribution range of the species today and the potential distribution in the future along a climatic gradient. And we see that in the very south of these species, or more in this warmer range, the species might lose some part of this area. In the north, the species is expected to gain some significant area. And there will be an overlap between there is in many species an overlap between the actual distribution and the projected future distribution. However, we can foresee that even there might be strong climatic changes within these still continuing distribution ranges. And if we are looking for the processes that might be ongoing, then we can consider that the area that the species might gain in the future in the regions which are today rather cold, we can call that assisted species migration. Then within the area where the species is present today and will be present in the future, we might require assisted gene flow. That means we might need to transfer genes adapted to these warmer environments to the north. And in the very south, in the warmest areas of the distribution, we need to think about how we can conserve these valuable genetic resources, which are under present conditions adapted already to warmer conditions. And we might need ex situ conservation of these genetic materials over here. This assisted migration is being in discussion already for the last 15 years. And in some regions, there is already policies being developed how to implement it on the forest nurseries in the forestry sector. However, in Europe, there is still lots of discussions are ongoing. There are some problems with the policies, and the big question is this assisted migration already ready for implementation in Europe? And if you think about that, we need to answer a couple of questions. This is which tree species harbor adaptive genetic variation related to the climate conditions? From a practical reasons, how to identify valuable populations for seed transfer, and how to match them with the future habitats. Of course, we have to discuss what are the climatic limits for seed transfer. Of course, we also have to discuss about policy problems. Are there any legal constraints in seed transfer? This is with our many different countries, maybe different policies within the countries, a very important topic. And of course, we have to also think about how we can use silvicultural measures to increase the genetic potential of tree populations. So there are lots of different questions. I'm not able to answer all of these questions right now, but I will try to justify why assisted migration might also be needed for Europe, and what we can already say about that at present. So what we have done in a past project, we already mentioned that this is the SUS3 project. We were interested in collecting lots of data of provenance experiments across Europe to identify local adaptation of the tree species and to predict potential directions for assisted migration. And with lots of these colleagues from Europe who supported us within this project, we were able to collect a significant number of provenance experiments. Altogether, we got data from nearly 600 experimental trials for these 7 main European tree species. There are mainly Central European and Northern European species. This was because mainly our project all focused on Central Europe. However, among these 7 European tree species, they altogether make about 70% of the European forest. They cover about 70% of the European forests. So it's a huge part of our forest ecosystems where they are dominant. And just to show you a little bit how this looked like, we got, for example, for Norway spruce, we got altogether data from nearly 250 trials, and with data from more than 1,000 tested seed sources. And we brought this data together in a harmonized data of provenance trials. And our technical approach was that we used so-called universal climate response models with a random forest approach to model the growth parameters for these species in relation to the climate of the provenance region and in relation to the climate of the site conditions. So the climate of the site conditions have always been these trial locations, and the provenance regions have been these blue dots where these provenances come from. But of course, this picture here just shows a very simplified model of this, just height growth in dependence of mean annual temperature of the provenance region and mean annual temperature of the site. However, in reality, we used as much climate variable as has been needed. So just as for example here, show this for Norway spruce, we for example got altogether 7. We found out that 7 climate variables are significant predictors of the growth performance of Norway spruce. Among these 5 different site variables and 6 variables of the provenance locations. What you can do with these data and with these models, we were of course not able to predict the growth of each single population or each single seed stands within Europe, and that's why we use this more. Let's say we made a similar, more simplifying approach and divided the species distributions into clusters with a similar climate. So altogether, there has been up to between 9 and 11 climatic clusters that we used. And all these clusters, they have been different they differed according to the climate variables that were within these models. And then for each of these clusters, we could predict what is their productivity across Europe. And for each point within Europe, we could identify which cluster would be the most productive at this site. So this was the general approach. For example, and I'm going only in, not so much in the details here. For Norway spruce, we found that the clusters 4, 5, and 7 have been the most productive at many regions. And however, with climate change under current conditions, we would select other climatic clusters than as under future conditions. And on basis of these kind of models, we developed seed recommendations that are now available for 7 different species. I already said it was silver fir, beech, larch, Norway spruce, pedunculate oak, sessile oak, and Scots pine. And this is just an overview about these different clusters. So it was up to 11 clusters for each species. And we could show each of these clusters. There are some clusters in some species that were independent of the climate change scenario, always the most preferred one. In other, there has been significant changes in these clusters between these regions. What we wanted to test, however, was not only in which directions we should transfer some provenances or seed provenances. However, we were interested in whether the transfer of the seeds to another region would have any impact on the carbon sequestration of this forest. So our question was, how much carbon could be added to European forests if proper seed provenances would be planted in the future? Our assumption was that we should aim not necessarily at the current tree species distribution, but we should mainly aim at resilient forests and plant those tree species which show a high suitability in future climate. That means we already assume that there would be an ongoing change of the tree species. That means where today we have secondary Norway spruce forests, in the future we probably would plant oak forests or silver fir forests or beech forests. This was the one assumption. And then, since for our models we mainly have data from until the tree age of 40 years, where we know also that the next 30 years decide on the fate of our climate. So that means carbon sequestration is especially important for the next years. And we also did not look on all land area, but we only considered the actual forest area, and not if let's say some region would decide that that there is an additional afforestation needed to support climate change mitigations. These were the basic assumptions of our model. And with these, we first had to decide on the tree species selection. So as already shown, there is this change of tree species, and there are a couple of studies, or there have many studies already available on the potential tree species distribution area. We had our species distribution models for this, and the changes that we have seen have been very similar to for example, what has been shown already by Mark Hanewinkel 10 years ago, that we would have a decline of beech, a decline of spruce, a decline of pine, and especially an increase of the oak species. And these are the tree species according to the models that we developed for this case. And we mainly look now at the results for the climate change scenario RCP 8.5. So this is always this a little bit stronger climate change scenario with temperature increase between 3 and 5 degrees Celsius for the European continent. And you see that in many of these areas that we considered, oak species, Quercus petrea and Quercus robo would be the most dominant species, while the conifer species would not get so important anymore in the future. And after we also then calculated the carbon sequestration, the annual carbon sequestration of the different seed sourcing strategies. You see first now the carbon sequestration that went on that we could reach if we only use local seed sources. And with our models under current conditions, we within these conditions of the age classes 1 and 2, again, it's until 3 ages of 40 years, we would consider that these forests for these 7 species are able to sequester 44 teragram of carbon annually. And with climate change on the RCP 4.4, this carbon sequestration would decrease to 30 teragram per annually. And under the stronger climate change scenario, these total carbon sequestration of this forest would go down to 25 teragram. So just to give you a comparison, at the moment, these, and just think again, we only consider relatively young forests. These would mix up 28% of the European annual forest carbon sequestration across Europe, according as comparison with the Forest Europe data from 2020. This would go down to 16% of what we see today as Europe's annual forest carbon sequestration capacities. However, if we consider assisted migration and always select for our reforestation the best seed sources according to our models, we would see that we would be able to increase the carbon sequestration capacity under current conditions. And of course, this is not an option because this reforestation would have been taken in the past. But even under, if we would consider to have been used better provenances in the past, then we would see much better carbon sequestration capacity than we see already at the moment. If we then consider climate change, we see that even under the strongest climate change scenario, we would be able to more or less maintain the carbon sequestration capacity of the forest that we are going to replant. Of course, these forests would look completely different. This would be other tree species. That would be, as you see from the colors of the tree species, that would be lots of oak forests. That would be more beech forests, much less pine and much less spruce forests than they are today. So these are on the present condition would be 29% of the present European annual carbon sequestration that we see today. So altogether, we see that if we consider assisted migration in contrast to go for local seed sourcing, we would be able to increase the European forest carbon sequestration capacity significantly in the near future. And then we were not sure if this increase of carbon sequestration productivity and carbon sequestration capacity would be only due to shifts of productivity from Central Europe to Northern Europe. And that's why we especially looked also at the different European regions in which these species that we worked on will occur today and will occur in the future. And we found that these differences in the carbon sequestration capacity between local and the best seed sources are very similar in all European regions. So this is not only an effect from shift from productivity from Central to Northern Europe, but an effect that could be seen in all European regions. Conclusions: our long-term provenance data, and it has been experiments that have been managed for a long time with data of over more than millions of trees that have been measured for the last decades. All these data together, brought together in empirical models, shows that local adaptation at European scales can be used as a basis for assisted migrations. We see that for each species, 2 to 3 provenance clusters will be best suited for reforestation in large parts of Europe. And these clusters could be used as basis for breeding and conservation measures. We also have seen that assisted migration is able to maintain the forest carbon sink if the afforestation young stands, even if we consider that we would plant anyhow the more resilient tree species than we use today. and assisted migration sequestered 80% more carbon under strong warming compared to the situation if we only go for local seed sources in the future. So now many of you will ask me and want to know where can I get this information, because that's very complicated and for practitioners not difficult to get. So in order to already show what that could mean, we started to develop a tool. This is not a final tool, but we call it a Seed for Forests. It altogether has been developed in 3 different Interreg projects where we worked within. And what does this tool is doing? You can go on this website and you can get some basic information on this project and what the tool is doing. And in the first place, you can search for a specific region. You just add on your local area where you are, your town or village, and then you can select the forest site, the nearest forest site where you would think about the restoration or a reforestation, and then you get an overview of in total of the tree species suitability for 13 different tree species. 67 species have been included in this tool from the Interreg project SUS3, and from another Interreg project, from the Refocus project, we add another six species to this tool. And you also can think about which climate change scenario you think would be most likely for your region, or you might even which scenario you think most likely anyhow. And then you get an information on the general, let's say you get a map of the suitability for the selected species, and there is even a button where you can get a list of the recommended seed stands. And with this list of the recommended seed stands, you will see, you would be able to see an overview about seed stand clusters with these suggested seed provenances across Europe. These data are coming from the Forematis database. They are not complete, I have to say. That's why it looks in some regions still a little bit empty. And you get here you can here get a download list, which shows you the nearest recommended seed sources for your region and for your afforestation, according and not necessarily from your country, but from general Europe, and just also showing which seed cluster this is, from which altitude it is, and how far it is from your region. So that means the best seed source is not always those, also in the future, not always those which is far away, but it might also be those which are, that can even be very close by. This tool has a lot of limitations at present. It's based on an incomplete European database on forest reproductive material, the Forematis. The Forematis, some countries do not bring all their data, for example, Germany, into the Forematis database. Then it covers only selected seed stands at present. So we do not have included any seed orchards or any source identified stands. And of course, it cannot be fully applied in all countries because there are legal restrictions in the different countries. For now, the target groups of these Seed for Forests are mainly nurseries, seed traders, large forest companies, maybe for their strategic planning, stakeholders and policymakers for information, but of course not for end users or small forest owners, because on the market, many of the recommended seed sources will likely not be available now. However, of course, we intend also to further work on this tool, also to allow it also for the end users in the near future. And of course, we continue to work on these tools on the scientific basis of that, but also on the practical applications within 2 projects. On the one side, in the SUPERB project, where we already started to compile a lot of ideas how we can make more user-friendly, where we can include more important information for the restoration communities, but also within another European project, OpForest, where we are also will provide further scientific inputs into this platform. And with this, I thank you very much for the attention and being here on this seminar. And thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Silvio, thank you very, very much. I mean, you managed to bring all these information. It's a huge work in only 30 minutes in a very clear way. So I learned myself a lot. Thank you for this. I have myself a lot of questions, but I will leave the floor for my colleagues and especially Andreas. I remind the participants that you can please put your questions in the Q&A section, and then we will promote you to ask them directly. You open your camera and you do. Andreas, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Magda, and also thank you, Silvio. So thank you very much for the presentation. So I have to admit that I'm also a bit familiar with some, because we are colleagues and collaborators in the SAS3 project. And I see in the moment we have no Q&A or no question in the Q&A. So I will also try to be a bit provocative as I used to be. Silvio, one question concerning your model. I got from your presentation that, you know, your assessment of the appropriate populations or seed sources are mainly referring on growth. So how can you assess also ideas of survival? And you know, if you think about Norway spruce, we all know about the problems of bark beetle infestations and so on. And how is it reflected in your model? And do you think there might be also modification or a change in the evaluation if you include more this biotic aspects?
Let's say that I start with the last one. I think this, including also biotic aspects, will be extremely challenging. I have to say I don't have an idea for including biotic aspects right now, because just understanding these interaction between mortality of tree populations and genetics, it's extremely challenging, and probably under the conditions that we have seen in the past, under these very strong bark beetle outbreaks, even if there would be a genetic difference, it will be extremely hard to select the best ones out of that. So I don't see an option to include it in the models right now. The first question you mentioned, whether we just have productivity within the model, is not completely true. This is it's a kind of a misunderstanding maybe, and we already thought about how to also communicate it better. We are not looking at a maximum productivity, but we're looking at the best vitality and productivity under the warmer climate. That means the projections we are doing is not to maximize total productivity, but those productivity that can be reached within a certain climate. Let's say, just if you for chance, if you want to use or you try maybe within the seed selection tool within the seed for forest, and then you go for either RCP 4.5 or 8.5, then you will already see other seed recommendations, because under the stronger climate change there would be other provenances being more better growing. And the point is just that we have in our database also a lot of provenance experiments that have been in the past already at the climatic limits of the species. For example, for Norway spruce, there have been experiments that were even in Hungary at very warm sites, or there have been experiments that have been in the very low elevations in some other countries, in Austria, for example, and they already experienced these past much warmer climate, and they have shown that some of these provenances are pretty good under this warmer climate, and some of them are just pretty good under this warmer climate, and this is being considered. I understand it's a little bit difficult. What we want to aim in the future on is that there will be in one of these ongoing projects in the op forest, there will also will consider much more to use also tree cores. And within the tree cores, we will not only evaluate the productivity, but also the resilience and resistance of the provenances to droughts, for example. And we look forward that we include these resilience also in our model. So this would be an option, because there are a couple of studies that already have shown that these resilience that we can see in the tree cores under drought conditions is very strongly related to mortality at a later stage of these individuals. So we see this as a chance. This will certainly be an update within the next coming 5 years or so.
Thank you. Silvio, the model you showed is about the 7 species you studied, and you explain it by saying that only for this one, they cover 70% of European forests. But then in the start of your presentation, you explained this geological scale and the extinction rate we saw. And then we see clearly that the Mediterranean acted as a barrier for migration. It was in the middle where species cannot move. This is why we had a high rate of extinction. Yeah. But at the same time, we have also some pockets due to the geomorphology of some of the Alps, of Pyrenees, Balkans, etc. We have some refuge area where some species came back again or just stayed here because they couldn't go further. So I'm asking, I mean, some of these species, if they can benefit from this assisted migration, may really benefit European forests for the future. So how open is Europe to consider this kind of refuge or new species? I'm asking, for example, for cedrus, that we know from fossil pollen, etc., that it was in Europe and it disappeared because of this. And now, due to its low dispersal rate, it doesn't cover again while it's accommodating very well. How open is Europe to this kind of approach, opening for more species than only these 7 we have?
Oh, that's a complicated question, and probably if you ask all people in the audience, you will get, let's say, 44 different answers probably. But I can just say it from my point and from my experience with the practitioners that we deal with. I think there is a huge interest in this, in topics of understanding from let's say trying out which other tree species might be suitable for the future climate. We in Austria, we have a couple of projects on this topic running. We also have some test plantations with cedro species, for example, or with Greek fir, or with any Mediterranean plants in order to see this. And there is a huge interest in that. But of course, there is also the discussion that some of these species might change our ecosystems and might have negative effects for biodiversity in the future. And we have to take these let's say considerations very seriously. And what we did in the past is that if we had in the last years, we started to look out for older plantations of forest trees that have been established in the past. And we went in this and looked also into the options of some of these species to naturalize then in Austria, or if there might be a problem in terms of, let's say, changing the site conditions, or being invasive in a way that they have negative effects. So I think these things need to be considered. And then on the final end, it have to be outweighed against these the changes of the natural tree communities that we probably see. As I showed this in one of my very early slides, that we probably undergo significant changes of the species and also of the tree functional diversity within many regions. So at the end, it might be an outweighing that we might lose something on the one side and we cannot get it back with another 2 degrees Celsius. There is no way to maintain to this situation. And then we need to think, okay, is it better to have small changes if, let's say, we move from silver fir to Greek fir, or let's say maybe to a provenance from southern Italy, Calabrian fir, Calabrian silver fir, or is it better just to leave this forest and having a degraded forest? So it probably will depend at the very end, let's say, a lot what kind of forest ecosystem service we are expecting from forests. But I think we at least should test it. We should be open to that. And I would also see it from the other point of view. Many of these Mediterranean populations, due to this much stronger climate change that you will see, might got extinct in the future. And this is also a very serious thought that we should have in mind, that we should not let's say endanger the existing tree species in the Mediterranean region much more than they are now already.
Makes sense, yeah.
Magda, may I just one idea to it, because I just more or less was also in a very tough debate on the different paradigm of large scale managing of ecosystem. So that's the question also to you, Silvio. Do you think that we have a contradicting paradigms on one hand on conserving existing ecosystem against the climate change pressure, and more or less managing the migration of the ecosystem? So because if you think more or less also on the ideas of EU regulations and so on, EU biodiversity strategy, this is very much, according to my point of view, linked to more or less a conservative idea.
Yeah.
And I get more or less from your idea that it might be needed also not to shift completely, but integrate also this migration idea. Am I correct with this idea?
Let's say, probably there is some, that there are these two different views on this nature conservation part. Yes, it looks from the outside as if they are so, let's say, on the opposite sides, but I actually wouldn't say so, because in many regions we would like to maintain the habitats for animals, for plants, for fungi, and so on. And many of these species will depend also on the tree species within these communities. So with climate change, we are not able to maintain just the tree species as they are on all of these regions. This is everything we know just impossible. So we might, if we want to conserve these biodiversity that are there and these species and also the genetic makeup of these populations, we need to go for that. On the other side, it's also important that, of course, we keep places for natural development, and it might be in national parks or natural forest reserves and other protected areas, that we just also can leave the nature as it is and, let's say, allow a natural reshuffling of the population. So I think both will be needed at some time. So it looks like these concepts are so in opposition to each other, but I don't think that they are need to.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat from Julius Mwansa. He's asking, have you considered soil nutrition for the growth of those tree species? How resilient are the species to drought and temperature?
That's complicated. So generally, in the models that we had, we have not considered any specific soil variables. And this is just the basis because they are not available on these large European scales. So they are not very good. The data that are available so far do not allow to really develop good models with that. This is also, we made a couple of years ago, we made a study just in Austria, and we were asking ourselves whether trees show local adaptations only to temperature or climate conditions, or whether they also show local adaptations to soil conditions. And what we had for this was just an Austrian study, and we were able to go back in some experiments and get really the good soil profiles from all these experiments that had been established in the past. And then we made a model and we were testing what is more important, the local adaptation to soil or the local adaptation to the climate. And we have found that actually the local adaptation to the soil could not be identified. It had from the overall measure of the effect on the model that only like 1 or 2% of the explained only 1 or 2% of the variation, whereas the local adaptation to climate was much more important. So that's why we could not consider it right now here, but I totally understand. Let's say, think there is more data and better soil maps would be needed to answer this question. The second question is about how resilient are the species to drought and temperature. I think this is a very general question about the species biology. We know that the oak species are much more resilient to drought conditions and temperature than the conifers, and that's why they also will have a wider tree species distribution in the near future. These informations are available on the species level, and they are also the basis for the for the species distribution models within the study.
I think we have a question from Marianne. Marianne, you can open your mic and ask your question, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I want to say hello to everyone. It's glad to be here on this presentation. I've been a little too late for her Silvio presentation, and if it's possible, if Silvio have it record in PowerPoint on some other way, I want to read later.
Yeah, it will be, it's recorded and it will be on the website of Superb, so you can see everything from the start.
Okay, great. First, I want to represent myself. I'm Marian Lozančić from Herceg-Bosnian Forest, Kupres, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And what I want to say, before half of year, every story about climate change and everything, it seems to me like, I don't know, imagining, because all of our area is 1,000 meters above the sea. But when I go with some kind of project in Germany, I see what is the real problem with everyone. Last month we have some meeting European forest community in Croatia, and then I talk with professors from Faculty of Forest in Zagreb, and they have some long-term research. That research showed them that black pine, Pinus nigra, hibernate in the dry period in the summer months, and then there is growth in the early spring and in the autumn, in the fall period. Did you, Silvio, and everybody know about that? This is for me, this is a discovery for a Nobel Prize in some way. They give us some answers for afforestation project and everything.
To be true, I'm not totally familiar now with this study. We see also with the black pine some problems, some real challenges in our main reforestation areas where we have them. We have also now studied a couple of let's say, and going back maybe to the topic, we have not looked at, we see the problems that we have due to some fungi, Diplodia pinea. That's the name of the fungi who causes these big trouble that we see. And we have, however, found out that if we are planting provenances from more south, let's say from Corsica, as well as from southern Italy, from Calabria, these provenances do not suffer so much from these fungi than the local provenances. And we made a couple of years a genetic study where we looked at especially as a lot of the plantations of black pine have been across, let's say, Eastern and Southeastern Europe. They have been made partly in the Austrian Empire. So there have been a lot of reshuffling of provenance in the Austrian Empire, really, especially on this black pine, because it was economically also very important. That even it was possible that even some material, let's say from the Balkans, were brought to Austria, or from Austria were brought to the Balkans. This is extreme. It's nearly impossible to find it out. But we have seen that from these group of provenances, they are more susceptible to these fungi. I'm not sure if this helps you with these questions. I'm not a total specialist on this, but at least there are options that with other provenances you can a little bit go through these through some of the let's say dieback we have seen.
Okay, thank you. I sent to you. I think we have some contacts. I sent to you this investigation.
Thank you very much.
Project because this is the really fascinated to me, because in our area black pine is a solution for deal with climate changing and everything. Also I must going now. I have some other meetings, so it's great to know that all what you talk I can see later, like Magda says. Also, sorry for my bad English, and I wanna say thank to you to everything. So goodbye from me.
Thank you, Marian. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Just before you leave, you can maybe save the link I put on the chat where you can see the webinars. It directs you to Superb website where we have all the recordings.
Okay, thank you. I will wait.
Andreas, do you see any question in the chat? Yeah.
Okay.
We have Tetsuto Sugai. Do you want to ask your question live? Just see if. Otherwise, I can read it. He declined. Okay. So the question is, thanks, great talk. I understand that the model predicts a future conversion from conifers to hardwoods. But is this an acceptable change for the European forestry industry and economy? If not, if it's assumed that conifers will continue to be used, then I think that assistance other than migration, especially hybridization, will be important. How much research is being done in Europe in this regard?
You put your fingers in an open one.
Yes, exactly.
And not only in one, maybe in two or three. No, but you're completely right. The European forest industry depends a lot on softwood species, and of course this is the main source of income, and it's also at the present the species that are mostly used, let's say, in our industries. So there are two questions. The one is, of course, with climate change, also our industries need to change and adapt their technologies, I guess. This is certainly a need that they already now started to understand, and also put some more research into other tree species, also in more broadleaf tree species, and think about how they can make better use of them. That's the one thing. The second thing is that we also need, what I just showed is the issue of the seed provenance problem. But of course, there are also options that with more tree species mixtures, you might still maintain a certain amount of conifer species, and getting the right and more, let's say, more resilient tree provenances might also be a small part of these solution to maintain a share of conifers. And then there's another topic that is hotly debated in Europe. This is also the use of non-native species, which can be either species coming from southern Europe, let's say some Mediterranean pine species or Mediterranean fir species are very interesting. We just looked at, so for example, at Greek fir, which also grows pretty well. Or we look at in the Caucasus region, where are some interesting species are growing, and we think about to use them. But I totally agree that also this issue with hybridization would be an important approach. I fear that there is not so much research on that as we would like to see, as I would like to see it, and I think as would be needed. It could be like let's say a hybrid larch. I think would be very interesting for some regions. But we also see that, for example, the hybrids between Greek fir and silver fir would be interesting, and there would be a couple of more issues that should be looked for, actually.
Okay, thank you. We have Mikhail Muravsky, who will ask his question.
Yes, good evening from Tokyo. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. First of all, thank you very much for the amazing presentation. I have two quick questions. The first one concerns the Seed for Forest tool you presented. The tool, I think in the third step, it showed numerical values about the potential fit of a tree species. And just in that moment, I only saw, let's say, rounded numbers like 700, 800, 900. Does it have a finer resolution than that as well? Let's say, I don't know, 752, or is it more, let's say, ordinal or like very rough and discrete in its assignment? That would be my first question.
Yeah, quickly.
And the second,
yes. So just answer this. Yes, they have. So they are just let's say the probabilities of occurrence based on these models, and the models itself are published, and there is a paper, a data paper, where you can actually download for the 7 species all these maps. And and the 700, it goes up to 1,000, but this is just for the better storage in the files. We multiply the probabilities up to cases of 1,000.
I see. Is it the Mauri et al. Paper?
No, it has been published before already.
Okay.
But we can. I'm not sure. Dave, do you have maybe if you are still here, can you put maybe the link to the paper in the yeah, here it is. Here we are.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And quick second question, sorry, in case I maybe missed that. Which tree growth models were utilized to generate the carbon dioxide sequestration values you presented in the bar charts? I'm sorry, maybe I not catched up.
No, yeah, we went too quickly over the technical issues. We actually used the models that came out. Let's say we made a model based on our observations in the provenance experiment, and these models allowed us to model height growth and as well as DBH growth, and they have been transferred into volume. And finally, in order to get to values on the total level for a specific area, we used the stand density index for a specific species to assume, let's say, a potential theoretical tree density on this area.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. I think we don't have any other question in the chat. Andreas, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, Silvio, perhaps also one question, perhaps going back also the idea of it's the gene flow and so on. I think there's also debate about the question if perhaps some tree species, like for example European beech, is able more or less to adapt more or less in situ due to epigenetic dynamics processes. So, and the idea that every beech has something like a certain potential which is hidden, but could be activated also. And for this, it might be also not needed to more or less transfer seeds from other regions in Europe, but just more or less that there's also an underestimated potential, adaptive potential of the more or less the local population. What do you think about it? What is your opinion about this?
I agree with you. I think the point is what in the full study that we have submitted, we also show that there are certain areas for each of these species where also the local material would be the best on the present conditions or even on the future conditions. These areas are going to decrease in the future, of course, this could be expected, but anyhow, the largest of these areas can be found in beech and as in oak. So we found overall that let's say the need for assisted migration is much larger in the conifers than in the deciduous trees. What from the process is not fully understand is these terms of plasticity that you mentioned. We have a couple of projects running with some colleagues in Greifswald, and we are going to make some of these studies also in Superb, where we look in a more detailed on this. So and we hope to bring up with a little bit more on this. At the moment, I would say there are some options, but we do not exactly know how far they can go. I mean, again, I think that also will little bit depend on what we are expecting from our forests in the future. You know, I mean, if the landowner says, okay, I would like to contribute significantly to climate change mitigation, and would like to have productive forests which are able to sequester a lot of carbon, then they might need more to go for better provenances. However, if they say, okay, we are more interested in the conservation aspects of our forests, and we want to maintain our forests for let's say for recreation, and just as forest ecosystems for biodiversity conservation, then they might also can work with, let's say, can also easily live with less sequestration, you know. But the point is, it depends much on what we as a society, but also the individual forest owners themselves are expecting from the forests.
Magda, you're still muted.
I had a visit, I had to mute. So I'm not very familiar with the models. I mean, what you include inside. Do you include the landscape heterogeneity? I mean, for example, mountains landscape, if the species can cross it or not. This is first point. And the second one, the extreme climatic event. Are these included also in your models?
Let's say the landscape, we don't have a specific migration component within the models, because we have just looked at a specific point or a specific part, a grid point, a forest grid point. So this is not specifically added, but of course, if it comes later to these, let's say, to projections of what provenances could be used, we see that within the mountainous areas, the best provenances might necessarily not come from far away, but might just come from a little bit lower elevations. While in other regions where there is where there are only flat terrains, then the best provenances might come a little bit from further away. So this is very much as you would expect.
Yeah.
What was this? Sorry.
No, yeah, but not just for the first one. But there's nothing, for example, you have a population that is displaced, and the best place for her would be like 100 kilometers to the north, but then you have a physical obstacle for it to cross, like
but this is not considered yet in any of the models now.
And the second one, it's about the extreme events.
We have not, let's say, in the database, we do not have specific climate variables on a daily or a monthly basis, but we have considered, let's say, when we develop the models, we put also a lot of climate variables for extreme climate into, like summer heat moisture, maximum temperatures, let's say minimum temperatures in the winter and something like that. And if within the model, within the process of the modeling, we found out that one of these extreme climate variables is a significant predictor, we left it in the model. In the other case, we don't have it. But the problem is that within our, let's say, within our data, we don't have this information exactly within. We made a couple of years ago a study on that was more on Douglas fir, where we looked in where we got very detailed daily data on temperature extremes, and then we were able to see how the mortality of the different provenances was dependent on these climatic extremes. It was mainly frost events in this case. So this would be possible maybe for some of these experiments, but probably not for all.
I think we have a question in the chat that goes in the same direction, and it's from Wim. Please, Wim.
Yes, hi. Basically, this was the same question about peak temperatures, because in the south, we might expect temperatures from time to time above 50 degrees. At 51 degrees north, we might expect probably 45 degrees. So my question basically was, is it possible to include it in the models? But you've answered it basically already. And then thank you very much for the tool, because it looks really, really great and practical. Basically, this is something we were looking for. I'm working for the Agency for Nature and Forest in Flanders, Belgium. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I hope it will be developed further so that we can get practical seed lists from it as well.
Thank you for the suggestion. Also to your question, our problem is, of course, that we got only data from the past, and our provenance experiments have rarely seen these temperatures. So this is also a limitation of the concept of using these provenance experiments. That in the past, these provenance experiments have been established more or less within the comfortable zone for these tree species, and we have only a limited number of these experiments which have been established already in an area where the species would not occur in the past. So that means we can only predict into a limited future, and our real future might look more difficult. So at the moment, we're thinking if we are establishing new provenance experiments, we already set some of them under conditions where we know that many of them might not be able to survive. So maybe this helps in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Ed, this reminds me a bit to a conversation to a modeler a few years ago, and he told me that reality is a rough approximation to my models. So it's always a kind of a perspective. What is reality and what is model? But one question, and this relates also to the idea of modeling. I think it's very important, to my point of view, that models are still more or less limited, but they should be also limited, because it should support our ideas and understanding, neglecting really neglecting some of the less important parts. And this is also leads also to the idea, if you include, for example, all the plasticity aspects, and this is linked perhaps also to biotic aspects, you never get to an end to it. So I guess it's also an idea to think about the limitations of modeling, but on the other hand, not try to mimic completely reality, because this is not the idea of modeling.
Silvia, I have a question concerning genetic conservation unit that U4Gen is preparing. I mean, all of these seed sources, or I mean, how important is the genetic component or the characterization of the genetic component is before I mean, how important is this information to have before recommending to use this forest as a seed source? Because somehow the conditions are good, but maybe genetically it's not diverse enough in order to give the potential we expect for it.
Yeah. I think there is you're right. There are a lot of limitations, because at the moment for us, these recommended seed sources are just, let's say, seed stands that have been assigned, that have been authorized by the local authorities to be seed stands. Of course, they went through a quality check, and they checked whether the size is appropriate, whether the trees are vital, and so on. So the more typical forestry perspectives, but very few seed stands have been genetically monitored, or where very few data that we have on these seed stands. And it would, of course, be pretty good if we would have these genetic or genomic information. There are a couple of studies that go also for these assisted migrations models with more genetic and genomic information. And of course, if you include this information, then you can also improve the predictions for this assisted migration. So I'm looking very much forward that we can work on this also in the future for some of the species, but we also will see the problem that this will, let's say, for within the next 10 years, I can see that might happen only for maybe 5 or 6 species. But on the other side, for a kind of adaptation of forests, we need not only our 5 main tree species, we need more rare species. So, and I see rather the challenge to include also these rare species that are needed for these tree species mixtures, and to give for these other species also some recommendations. And we won't be able to have any genomic data on them for really good models on that. So we are now working on to extend these assisted migration projections, also based on information, just on poorly climate information, instead of provenance experiments or instead of genomics. So both directions, I think, needed, and to extend just the information that is needed for restoration.
We can work on this.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think I have no more questions in chat, and we are almost very close to our end. Andreas, do you have something to add? Or...
No, I'm completely contented. I'm very fine with this.
Any final words, Silvio?
My final word. No, thank you for listening, and so many people came here. Just maybe a question to Andreas. You mentioned also, you asked me about the effects of plasticity and epigenetics information, and I think you are also a little bit working on these topics for beech. And what is your opinion, or what is your status quo at the moment?
Yeah, I think this could more or less prolong this very much, but perhaps I think some results also of our comparison, for example, of the coniferous species, and this is more or less as an example done on Norway spruce and European beeches, and this supports also your idea that we found much more plasticity towards, for example, drought, in terms of drought adaptation to extreme drought and survival within beech, and also quite large differences among different provenances than on Norway spruce. And this supports also your idea, what you've mentioned, that perhaps more or less this idea of assisted migration or assisted gene flow has more potential for coniferous species like Norway spruce than for European beech. So, and that more or less also that adaptive potential of European beech in situ might be larger, for example, of Norway spruce. But one point, and this is not only just but also within our network of ecophysiologists, that one thing turned out for European beach, which makes me really, skeptical to the overall adaptive potential of European beach, is that beach is seems not to be able to control its water losses. So if you look more or less on the response on extreme drought, many species, like also Norway spruce, are able really to close the stomata and really to preserve the water resources within the plant, but also within the soil. But European beech is not able. So even under very extreme drought and extreme low water potentials within the tree, they are losing water. It's not quite clear if it's via the cuticula or via the stomata, but this makes European beech very much susceptible to long-term droughts. So at the end, there's a limited potential to stand long-term drought, and this is something which might be critical. And in addition, if you think about also the discussion about extreme temperature, 40 degrees or even more, I think this combination might be a critical aspect in the adaptive potential of European beech. On drier side, on lower elevated, might be not the problem. On more or less higher elevations and so on, but this could be really a critical limit of beech drought limitation.
Okay.
We have one very last question in the chat. And it's from Tetsuto, and I will read it for you. So let me ask one more question. Have you also accumulated data on sapling growth and survival rates in previous European trials? Realistically, I would assume a phase of reforestation, but it's possible to predict the growth by age of trees in the model.
I'm not sure if we completely understood it, but let's say our data sets that we have, there are very few of these data sets who also have sapling growth and survival rates. We have some of these in the data. In our present analysis, we mainly focus on a little bit the older trees, but it would be possible to extract some of them. Yes. I'm personally, I worked in the last 10 years. I established a lot of experiments, and with the experience I got in the past is that I would not trust the mortalities or the survival rates within the first years too much to depend on the genetics, because there are often in all the experiments that I have established, we have seen some unforeseen killers, like mice or insects or whatever else that randomly went through our experiments and killed some provenances, but just more randomly or spatially distributed. So I think it's relatively complicated. But yes, there are some data on this, and there have already been some publications that just work with these seedling experiments, which also considered or calculated maladaptations. I'm sure that especially on the sapling grow, you already can learn a lot, because there you are able to also quantify other traits than in the older trees itself.
Thank you very much. Now it's time to close. So thank you very much, Silvio, for your really very interesting presentation and interesting Q&A. And also, Andrea, thank you, and for the participants. And now I would announce our next webinar, but I will not say more, that it's only a surprise for Christmas, because it's our last for this year, and it's in December. So stay tuned in our social media or email or newsletter. We will be sharing more about what we will be expecting as surprise in December for our webinar. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you,
Magda.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.